Good evening and welcome to a special edition of the Drive at 5 on the intellectualradio.com/iHeart radio station. I'm your host, Roman, and welcome to be back on Intellectual Radio. We have a great show planned for you today. Please don't forget to stay tuned to intellectualradio.com after the Drive at 5 for Warriors Talk with Rochelle at 6 p.m. with love and inspiration she provides throughout the week. So make sure you stay tuned. My guest is the Congressman for the 7th District and on several committees in the House. Please give a Drive at 5 welcome back via Zoom to Congressman Danny K.Davis. Welcome back to the Drive, sir.
Well, thank you very much. And it's, of course, a pleasure and a privilege to be here and to be with you. I love what you do, and it's a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Really appreciate it. Let's get started first with the coronavirus and the testing mechanism. Corona is receiving an uptick across the country and here in Illinois. Recently, the mayor and the governor held press conference today to say we're at a yellow, but we're going to go to red sometime soon, and they're predicting by the end of the week. Free testing has been reduced to a very few locations in Chicago. Yes, they have free mobile units. However, it depends if it's in your area. Now, certain clinic, hospitals, health organizations, City of Chicago facilities, state and county, including Walgreens and CVS, are requiring co-payments or full payments of COVID-19 testing. The reason they're saying is the state is running out of money to provide free testing. What are your plans if the state of Illinois runs out of money for free testing of COVID 19 and no plans for a stimulus, according to media outlets, until the end of until next year, for we receive a stimulus package to include free COVID testing?
Well, let me just say this. The United States House of Representatives, which is where money spending for the federal government originates, has indeed passed two bills that would generate money for COVID relief, including testing. The other body, the Senate, has not been in agreement with any of that yet. Although the Senate is the body that would have to agree, the President of the United States would also need to agree. And so people just need to know how this really goes. Unless you get agreement from all three entities, you don't pass federal legislation. You don't get a bill passed. You don't generate the money that you need. Negotiations have broken off, but they've started back. And as of 3 p.m. this afternoon, Nancy Pelosi and the Secretary of the Treasury were going back into negotiations, meaning that they were going to sit down again and try to reach an agreement. Initially, we passed a $3.4 trillion bill for coronavirus relief. The Republicans said a lot of things at that point. DOA in the Senate dead on arrival. There are some people who don't believe that the federal government should be providing this much relief. And you got to understand about the federal government. there are some members of Congress in both the House and the Senate who believe that the federal government has gone beyond its intent, that it was never intended for the federal government to provide all of the resources that it has been provided, that it was supposed to be basically the policeman of society. You set up rules and regulations and everybody else comply or abide with them. So I'm hopeful. State and local governments, for example, must have balanced budgets. The federal government can do what is called deficit spending. That is, you can spend money, you don't know where you're going to get it from yet, whereas state and local governments, when they submit a budget, they have to also say where you're going to get the $8 billion from that you say you're going to spend, or the 12, or the 20. Federal government does not have to do that, and we do deficit spending. We can go in the hole. So I'm hoping that we will get an agreement before the November 3rd election, and that hopefully we are pretty close. We're much closer than we were when we passed the HERO Act, which would have provided the $3.4 trillion. That will provide money for testing, for other health services, as well as money for unemployment compensation and other things that are needed.
Seniors and senior citizen facilities have a somewhat overlooked somewhat throughout the COVID-19 epidemic. There is no rapid testing or making senior facilities to purchase mandatory testing equipment to test seniors and staff members on the regular that would come in contact with a person or have the virus inside their facility. What is the federal guidelines for seniors or senior facilities to follow if they are not being held accountable? However, forcing seniors to pay full costs of living, and some have been evicted and not concerns for their safety. Your response to that?
Again, if you provide the guideline, you also have to provide the money. You cannot get blood out of a turnip.
But it,
You
sir,
can
in all due
massage it.
respect, in all due respect, most of these senior facilities are privately owned. Why they're not held accountable?
Many of them are publicly owned, are publicly subsidized. There is a tremendous amount of public subsidy providing housing for senior members of the population. But the question real boils down to, again, if you don't appropriate or generate the money, how do you pay for whatever it is that you're talking about? And so Frederick Douglass was so right years ago when he said this: in this world, you may not get everything that you pay for, but you most certainly will pay for everything that you get. And so you can't do it without generating the resource, the money. You got to pay for it. There's no free lunch. There's no free equipment. There are no free tests. There's no free serum. There's no free anything. It has to be paid for. And the source of that payment ultimately has to be our federal government, because state and local governments cannot just create money. They can't do it. The federal government is the resource that we need in order to provide the provisions that are needed to assess the impact of the virus, to prevent the virus from spreading. Yes, there are things that every citizen can do, but in order to prevent the spread, it really takes our national government with a national policy that will have people functioning the same way throughout the country in terms of wearing masks, washing your hands, staying out of crowds, sneezing in your arms, doing all of the public health things that we know that you can do. And if we're not doing that, then we are part of the problem and not a part of the solution.
Some experts are saying it will be another shutdown soon to prevent another serious potential spread of the virus. More and more people are taking advantage of food pantries, and some experts predict a food shortage, especially in the Black community. What measures your district have in place to combat a potential food shortage?
And it's not my district, it's not what we have. The federal government is buying up food from farmers who can't sell it and distributing it. Of course, I think it's unfortunate that in the packages, there is a letter coming from the president. I think that's kind of unethical, especially with the election being this close. But you know, farmers have had to just dump food, dump milk, uh, throw food away because they couldn't sell it. And food is being provided through the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Now, it's not enough. Nothing is ever enough. It's not what is totally needed, but there's a lot of food floating around right now. And almost any person that is hungry or malnourished and can't get food on their own, there are in probably my district, I would say at least 40 distribution places where people are giving away and handing out food. Matter of fact, I have personally been out riding on a bus, going through neighborhoods, asking people if they wanted some of these food boxes. But that doesn't really solve the problem. I mean, it provides some help for some people, but we need something far more comprehensive than that. And what we need most of all is we need to arrest the virus so that people can get back to work, so that we can bring our country back to a level of what is called normalcy. And that's the only thing that's going to give us the chance to get back into economic shape and get the economic groove going so that we can produce and distribute what it is that people need to survive.
When you go back to Congress, will there be an increase in SNAP benefits, including a cash stimulus for people in your district? I know you just don't represent the District 7, but also, the American
Well,
people. But there, a lot of people said it was a question going around during the first stimulus package. And I want to bring this question to you. What happened to the SNAP benefits increase? And there was something on the table that Nancy Pelosi put on the table that the Republicans said no. Will that be on the table that $1,200 per month will give to the American citizens for 1 year?
well, we have not been able to generate anything more than what we've been able to generate. I'm saying the $1,200 stimulus check, the $600 a week unemployment check that people have gotten, the millions of dollars that have gone to our hospitals and health centers and to people to stave off mortgage foreclosures, to stave off small businesses being shut down. You have to take all of this in the big package. I'm saying the $3.4 trillion contains some of all of that. Now that's relative to the pandemic.
But let me
Whether
push
we had
back
a
on you on
pandemic
that.
or not,
Let me push back on you. Some Republicans call what the Democrats are putting in the bill pork, and they're saying it's going to cause more deficit of what the Democrats are putting in the bill. So, what is the equilibrium to get what you want and the Republicans want as well?
maybe pork in what the Republicans are saying, but it's chicken to the poor person who's about to starve to death. It's beans, it's meal, it's flour, it's apple, it's oranges, it's something to eat. It's to keep my gas from being turned off. It's to keep my lights on. It's to allow my children to have a daycare center to go to. It's allowing the schools to be cleaned up and disinfected. So if children have to go, at least they're going safely. So it may be pork to some Republicans, but it's life sustaining to people who don't have any other way of living and any other way to make. That's what negotiations are about. We've been negotiating all the time. And even without a pandemic, and one of the things the pandemic has demonstrated or shown up is the huge disparities that exist between quality of life among some population groups and others, some communities, some neighborhoods, and others may be poor. But if your population group is dying disproportionately, as Black people are, as Latinx people are, as essential workers are, because they can't work, they must work. And as young people are, who don't have computers so they can do online classes, and they can't get on the internet, or they don't have hotspots. Well, it may be pork to some Republicans or Democrats or whoever, but to the people who are on the verge of absolute collapse, it is life sustaining for them. And we have to make sure that they get an opportunity to keep living, because if they don't live, they're going to die.
You mentioned the internet and regarding virtual homeschooling. CPS basically is looking for some plans to get the children back to school. Some is basically saying, let's bring them back in December. Some are saying in January. Where do you stand? Because right now, there are some people, you can get the internet on the phone, but you cannot get the internet. They don't have like laptops or anything to that fashion to do their schoolwork, but they have internet on their cell phone. And you've been
Now,
pushing for that. Go ahead, sir.
I say bring them back once public health experts say that it's safe to do so. All this speculation, all of this conversation, the realities are that the COVID pandemic is an experience we have not had. And finding the remedy for it takes experts who have studied it, who know the most about it. And those are the people in whom I will put my trust. And so if the public health experts say that it's unsafe to bring them back, then I agree with them. If they say that now we can bring them back, then I think that would be the time to bring them back. So the realities are, who do you believe? Who do you trust? Who do you put your faith in? I put my faith in this instance in the public health experts, knowing that they have studied the issue. My ultimate faith is in the Almighty God that I think controls the universe and has the power and the ability to create the environment or to orchestrate the wisdom so that those individuals who study science will be able to figure out for us what we need to do in order to arrest the virus. So my money is on the experts.
Even though your money is on the experts, sir, Congressman, there are schools in the state of Illinois, including some in your district, are allowing children to go back to school, and they're following methods, and they're saying that, well, so far so good. That includes OPAR. They allow their children to go back to school, and so far, again, so far so good, with a little hiccups here and there. So now, according to what they have said um, in a press conference, they're thinking about allowing children to go back in December and January. But here is the thing. It seems like, and it sounds like, that they really initially didn't have a plan to give them a way to, if we're going to go do virtual, then we have to have students access to virtual learning. If we're going to have them back safely at school, then we have to follow a method. So there is no really remedy. And some people would say, why they just didn't follow a track E method that you are familiar with. The track E method is basically, some schools start 2 weeks ahead of the other schools, and then they reduce the population in half. Some attend, some virtual. Again, it just sounds like they really didn't have a plan. Your response?
Well, that sounds like a plan. I mean, if you say some virtual, some in person, um,
But
I have a
that's
bill.
kind of like considered a track E method that they had years ago, Congressman. The track E method basically said school starts this time, this time, this time. It's not all at once, and it gives people a chance and an opportunity to, and including the teachers, to get their classrooms together more quickly, sanitize more quickly, you know, so
But
forth and
if
so
you
on.
can do it, if you can do it safely, that's the question. And so if there are school districts who have determined that they can bring young people back safely and they decide to do it, and those are the decisions that they and their experts have made, I am sure that the parents in those communities are in agreement with what the decision makers have determined. Otherwise, I guarantee you they wouldn't be doing
A lot of
it.
go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
I'm saying I don't know any decision maker other than maybe one. And I won't say who that one is. But most decision makers try their best to be in the same place as the individuals for whom they are making decisions. And so if a school district decides that it's safe for them to resume in-person education, they didn't just willy-nilly decide that. They went through a tremendous amount of effort and assessment, analyzing the situation and deciding that it's now safe for us to put our children back in person. I guarantee you it wasn't done willy-nilly, that they had some data, they looked at spaces, they looked at all the things that they needed to look at in order to arrive at what they felt was in their best interest.
A lot of college students, graduates, and doctoral students need stimulus money to provide for themselves. As you said earlier, living. Last stimulus, colleges and universities receive packages under the discretion of the university and college. Only certain students receive the money. Will there be a separate stimulus package for college students or students who are seeking higher education or training?
Well, but there are regulations. I'm saying nobody gives any entity a piece of money and say distribute it any way that you want to. I mean, there are guidelines, there are approaches, there is criteria. And so any money that is given with condition, and such would be any education money as well. Certain students would have to meet qualifications in order to access the money. And so, yes, education is a big factor in our society. And as we provide resources for other entities, you know, about half the restaurants in America are about to go out of business. So they need help. They need resources. Hardware stores are about to go out of business. They need every segment just about of our society is in need of help. So guidelines have to be put in place to help determine who gets the money and on the basis of what. And such would be education money as well.
Certain people would say, okay, we get what you're saying, sir. However, the however component of this, there were stimulus money, big chunks of stimulus money. And I'll give you a prime example. The Lakers receive close to $1 billion. They had to return it. Big corporations receive stimulus money and they left little guys out, and that includes like some college and restaurants that you have mentioned, and they're saying, okay, there's a second one coming. Then the corporate, are they going to do this again? What's going to
But the
happen
only
to the little guy?
reason they had to give it back, of course, legislators make laws. When a person gets elected to public office, there are four things that they can do. They can legislate, that is, make laws. They can appropriate, that is, generate and distribute money. Then they can investigate to make sure that the laws are being carried out the way they intended for them to be, and that the money is being spent the way they intended for the money to be spent. And so when it was discovered that some of these people had gotten money and it was not intended that they got the money, then we said you got to give it back. I mean, they didn't just up and decide themselves that they're going to give it back. As investigations revealed that somehow they had got something that was not intended for them to have, then they were told, give it up, unleash it, give it back. So I'm saying the process is working. Obviously, it is not working in perfection, and oftentimes does not work as well as we would intend for it to work. But we do have those investigatory powers where we investigate to try and make sure that things are being used and carried out the way we intended for them to be. And then if they're not, let's change it and give it back.
People who are renting or paying mortgage are worried about a place to stay because of eviction. Last week, the governor of Illinois, Pritzker, did sign another eviction moratorium until the end, until mid-November. I'm sorry. People who are landlords or own a home are saying people are getting off scot-free and they are still evicting people. Landlords and mortgage companies are taking advantage of the last stimulus package, however, still evicting people. Your thoughts on what people should do if they're in that situation?
Well, there are different things put into effect. For example, even evictions are a part of process. I'm saying you can't just go and say to a person, get out, and they're gone. You got to file papers with the court saying that this person has not complied with the agreement that we made. They haven't paid rent. Therefore, I want them to be out of my property. Now, courts got to say, you're right, get out, and you got a certain amount of time to do it. Otherwise, we'll have the sheriff come and move your stuff out. Well, all of this takes time and process. It's good that the governor has been making these extensions, but we also need relief. We need money coming from the federal government.
But there are landlords and mortgage companies that already took the stimulus package and they're still evicting people.
Well, a judge has to sign eviction papers. And if I'm a judge and you've taken money saying that you were not going to evict people, why would I sign an order allowing you to evict someone? I mean, why would I do that? The landlord-tenant relations ordinance that the city of Chicago operates by is one that David O. and I wrote when we were on. It's what they use. So if the person is getting away some kind of way, and we got all these judges asking people to vote to retain them 2 weeks from now, if they ain't following the rules and following the law, why would we want to retain them? I mean, they are going to be as prudent as they can be. But the whole idea is to try and make both the landlord and the tenant whole, which means that there need to be money available to assist tenants pay their rent. There need to be money available to help individuals pay their mortgages and not be foreclosed out of a home that they've spent their lifetime trying to acquire. That's why we need relief money coming from the federal government. We can't just in the air say, do this without somebody being hurt and somebody being harmed. But the best thing that we need to do, and we need to do it as quickly as possible, is get rid of the virus so that people can go back to normal productivity, so they can go back to work, so there can be the exchange of goods and services, which would keep our economy thriving and keep things flourishing. And so if we don't arrest the virus, none of these other things become possible, because you can't convene. You can't go to work. If you can't work, then you can't get paid. If you can't get paid, then you can't pay the barber. Then you can't pay the person at the grocery store. You can't buy gasoline. And so we need to try and get the virus in check so that we can then move ahead and restore our economy and get back to a level of what is called normalcy, so that things can function more like we've known them to. And I think that's where we really stand.
Speaking of normalcy, it's going to be a while before we get to that normalcy. If landlords or mortgage companies did receive, let's say, funding from the last stimulus check, however, they still have to pay state, county, and federal taxes. Should there be a moratorium for landlords or property owners from paying taxes until the government get a hold of this pandemic?
What we should do is our tax, the last big tax bill that the president supported, members of his party supported, say the state of Illinois, where you used to be able to, when you file your income tax, you could write off your state taxes. They changed the law where you can't do that. State and local governments are hurting badly. I mean, they're getting ready, they're laying off people. They're laying off police, well, not policemen at the moment, but the mayor just, got a budget. County board's got a budget. State of Illinois got a budget. All of these units of local government are hurting badly and need help from the federal government. There is no way around needing help, relief from the federal government with this pandemic affecting every walk of life in our country. And there's no entity in better shape to help than the federal government. The buck stops there. There's nowhere else to go. There's no other place except the federal government that can provide the help that is needed.
Some states, including Illinois, have a state grocery tax. Should the state and local grocery tax should be put on hold until the government have some control? They are taxing water bottles. They are putting taxes on plastic bags. Should there be like a brief 90-day or after the holiday a moratorium? Because again, you're talking about food shortages here, and you're
So
talking.
where does the state get its money to keep operating in the state? They can't print no money. They can't borrow on credit and just say we spending because we need to spend. I mean, we got highway patrolmen that we need to pay. We got university professors. We got children who need help. We got hospitals. So if the state is not collecting any taxes, where does it get its money from? I mean, how does the state function? The governor's been spending a decent amount of money.
Well, they're talking about it in all due respect, Congressman. They're talking about a flat tax. They're talking about a fair tax, and there are some people that's not paying their fair share. So that's on the ballot as of now, and
we're gonna vote in 2 weeks.
Right, to
And
decide.
I am urging every person that I can cajole to support the fair tax.
And why is that so?
Fair, it just simply says that if you don't make $250,000 a year, your taxes will not be affected in all likelihood. If you make $250,000 a year or more, you're going to have to pay more in tax. This is an income tax. This is an individual income tax. So that's what it says.
But it in some respect, to me, and I'm going by what I hear and what I see and what I have read, that it took a long time for people to have an understanding of what is a fair tax and what is a flat tax. And some people are still confused and they're just saying, you know what, I don't understand it, so no.
If there are 43 states that's got it, what's taken so long to understand?
But if they're not properly explaining it and it took them long enough to explain it,
I think if you don't make $250,000 a year, you ain't got nothing to worry about. If you make $250,000 a year, then you may have some reason to be concerned. And even if you make $250,000 a year, I still would advocate that you vote for it, because the Bible says, those to whom much is given, much is expected and much is required in return. If I made $250,000 a year, I wouldn't mind paying a little more.
All right. Speaking of that, let's turn to politics. I know we got a little bit time, so let's zip through these questions. You are supporting former Vice President Joe Biden. What is your expectation for the Black community in the Biden administration?
Well, I've already had some experiences with Joe Biden. On my main piece of campaign literature, I have a photograph standing next to Joe Biden when President Bush signed my Second Chance Act. Joe Biden was standing next to me in the White House when it was signed into law, because he introduced it in the Senate, just as I introduced it in the House. So I've had some experience with Joe Biden. But separating the Black community, I don't just separate on the basis of race and or ethnicity. I separate on the basis of haves and have-nots to a real degree. My primary action since I've been a member of any governmental unit has been looking out for the low end, the poor people, the disadvantaged, the people at the bottom, the people who need some action in order to move up. So I don't care if they're Black, I don't care if they're white, I don't care if they're green, I don't care if they're yellow, I don't care if they're polka dot. If they are part of this have-not group, then I want to help. I want to help bridge the gap between you and those way up yonder at the top.
Okay, rumor has it that Senator Tammy Duckworth will take the Veteran Affairs position, leaving a vacancy. You supported Duckworth last time. Would you like to see who would you like to see in that position? Rumors is floating around that former Cook County Commissioner Richard Boykin might be interested in that position again. What is your thoughts on
that? Let me tell you, first thing I want to do is make sure that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris get elected president and vice president of the United States Then we'll start talking about who he puts in his cabinet. And if he decides to put Tammy Duckworth in there, if that's what she wants to do, then I would be all in favor of it happening. And then there can be the scramble for who would replace her. And I'm sure that the governor of the state of Illinois would have a great deal to say about that.
Okay, I'm going to skip some of these questions. Maywood recently was in the news in your district. In recent reports, Maywood residents have been hit hard, extremely hard, with water bills. Some residents are worried that their water might be shut off because their bills are so high, in a range of five to even $1,500. As congressman in that district, what's going on and why residents are receiving these high water bills, and what should some of the
Maywood
residents?
has had high water bills ever since I've known Maywood. So this isn't new. It's not something new.
But what is the
People have
solution?
been trying. Let me just finish. Ever since I've known Maywood, Maywood has had high water bills. Of course, Maywood isn't the only municipality that has high water bills. I am in favor of trying to find water bills is not really and the federal government item as such, but helping find solutions to problems and issues. Anybody can do that from whatever vantage point that you sit. And so I'm very sensitive to the problems that Maywood had, not only in terms of its water bills. Maywood has experienced what many other communities have, and that is a loss of industrial activity, a loss of jobs, a lack of resources available to them. And so high taxes, high water bill, all of that is a part of the village of Maywood.
But wouldn't you contribute that to leadership, sir?
No, I don't. You got to be real. Leadership didn't make the companies that used to be there leave. And so you think that whoever was the mayor and the trustees, whoever could have stopped the companies that used to employ people from leaving, or they could have kept the people who had been there and owned the property and the houses and decided that they would move further west or move out and left some houses and so forth that were old and ready to need repair. And some other people decided that they'd move in. There used to be a time when people would move off the west side of Chicago to Maywood. They think they were going to heaven. But as they got to Maywood, the properties were getting older, and the properties ultimately got older, and the people who were middle class oriented, who worked hard and built up enough resources to buy themselves a house, they too were getting older. And now they live off of Social Security as opposed to living off of whatever their paycheck was when they were working. All of those things are factors that contribute to what a community is and what a community becomes. And so people just keep moving out, moving further away and further out. But that's all right, because the leadership that is there and the young leadership that's coming on, This is their time to find a solution to the problems that they will be confronted with. Other people had to find solutions to the problems that they were confronted with. Blacks who had to stand at one side of a room or had to go in a building that said whites here and blacks here, they confronted that problem. I grew up in rural Arkansas where they had coloreds and whites. Well, the folks confronted that problem. You don't have to go to no place and there's a sign saying coloreds and whites. Okay. Leadership moved that away. So I think Maywood's going to be all right because the leadership there, the people there, they're going to find solutions to the problems that they are confronted with. We're going to help them as much as we can convince the federal government to do so. But they're going to be all right.
All right. My last question to you, sir, and thank you for coming on the Drive at 5. You have represented the West Side for some time now. What will be Congressman Danny K.Davis' legacy be? Or
well, I have represented the West Side. I've represented the South Side. I've represented the North Side. I've represented the Chicago Loop. I've represented 24 hospitals, more hospitals than you find in any congressional district in the United States of America. I've represented a district that has as many colleges and universities and institutions of higher learning as many whole states have in their states. I've represented more public housing than all the rest of the public housing around Cook County at one time. And so I've represented a most fascinating piece of geography in America. Got its issues, got its problems, got great institutions, have great possibilities, but many of the people who live in my district came to the district again. As the houses were getting old, it quickly became overcrowded. And so the legacy would be helping people understand their own sense of empowerment and being able to make decisions for themselves.
All right. Thank you so much, Congressman Danny K.Davis. Please tell intellectualradio.com/iHeart radio station where they can get a hold of you. And what is your punch number, sir?
The number is 773-533-7520. That's my district office. And I think my number is 21 on the ballot.
All right. Don't be a stranger to the Drive at 5, sir. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. And carry on.
All right. Thank you. That's going to do it for us on the Drive at 5 on the intellectualradio.com/iHeart radio station. Thanks to Earl Winfrey, our executive producer, Wanda, who's behind the scenes. And thanks for Congressman Danny K. Davis. Have a good one, everyone.